Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. So those who have joined, if you can just introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you're from, maybe what your expectations are for today. If you've got any burning questions you want to ask, you can ask throughout as well. And I think use the chat feature to ask questions as well. We've also, so on the screen, we've got the kind of intro slide from Small Charities Week, which is, there's a link at the bottom for the recordings. So that's a really, I think things going up as and when, Wayne, or what's the?
Yeah, we've said 48 hours just to give ourselves some slack. So I think Mondays and Tuesdays are up now, but yeah, we've got a bit of a backlog because there's only 3 of us, and there's
of course, yeah. So I think this will be up on recording. So if any of your colleagues have missed it, you want to share it, I think you can obviously go on recording. But please check out all the other stuff as well. So some brilliant things been going on this week. And later on in the week, I think it's really exciting stuff. So lots of learning. I think I'm going to have to set aside a month just to go through them all. A few more just coming in. So apologies for my poor multitasking. I'm just going to let a few more people in.
Big hello to Josh from Active Oxfordshire and Catherine from Homestart Oxford.
Hello, Joy. Hello, Catherine. All people I know, so hello. Brilliant. Oh, about 4 more have been added. So that, I think if you can hear me, those who have just joined, if you can just introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you're from, and if you've got any expectations for today, anything you sort of burning questions, comments. It's quite a sort of open session in terms of, if there's something you really want to discuss. We've got 45 minutes, so do get it in there, and then we can chat about it. Let's just do that.
Hi, Clara from Cambridge Rape Crisis Centre.
I think I admitted 1 person and 1 dropped off, so that's I don't know if that's something I said. I think I'm going to kick off actually, and then I'm going to kind of half monitor the people coming in. A few people coming in just now, so if I pause and start talking halfway through, I'm trying to multitask. It's not going very well. So yeah, welcome everybody. If you can just write your name and where you're from in the comments, that'd be great. Please use the chat to ask any questions throughout. Wayne over here is going to be monitoring that as well. So I think there's a chance at the end to have a little discussion, a bit of a chat. Hopefully, I think we want to keep this obviously as tight as possible. Being small charity workers, we all know how tight things are and time. So thank you for your time so far, and thank you for your interest. So we're talking today about disability, and if I can move the slides on. Oh, there we go. So we're talking about employing people with disabilities or disabled people in recruitment, and we're kind of covering it staff and staff and volunteers. I don't know if we're talking the whole broad spectrum of charities here. So hopefully you'll get something out of today. In terms of who I am, so my name is Mark. I'm Chief Executive of My Vision Oxfordshire. I'm visually impaired myself, so I'm disabled. I have a disability. I've had that since birth, and I've kind of grown up with it, and obviously that's developed and changed over the years. Why I like about recruitment and why obviously it's something I'm really interested in and passionate about is personally I've struggled with employment in the past. As a young person, I was unemployed for some time, had very little kind of direction or understanding of where I wanted to be. And at kind of school level, I was told to go and find a job in a really big supermarket, because that's the only place you'd be able to work. And I find it really interesting now. I never could get a job in a really big supermarket, ironically, and now I've ended up in small charity sector, or charity sector. So I've been working in the charity sector now 14 years, 9 years here at My Vision Oxfordshire, and 2 years as CEO. And I'm going to introduce my colleague Dev as well. So Dev, do you want to just quickly say hi?
Hello, hello.
So Dev is our community engagement worker in the south of Oxfordshire, working across the south of the county. Dev, so the reason I brought Dev along as well is to kind of give another perspective of employment and being a disabled person finding a job, and what that's like and what barriers they face. So Dev, do you want to just explain a little bit your backstory in terms of
Yes.
seeking employment and
Mhm.
how you've got to where you are now, basically?
Okay, so just like Mark, I'm also visually impaired myself, so I have a guide dog called Mac. But during my sort of school time, my sort of eye condition, it kind of deteriorated as I've got older. So yeah, whilst I was at school, kind of it didn't affect me so much. So when I left school, I kind of had a part-time job in retail, which only lasted about 6 months, because obviously it wasn't actually, this is where I realized how my eyes don't really work as well as I thought they did. And then from retail, kind of realized I didn't like that. And then I moved into sort of animals and agriculture. So I went to college and studied a national diploma in animal management. And then from there, I got a part-time job working on a farm. And then I worked there for roughly 9 years. And then during lockdown, kind of had to leave all of that behind. And that's when my eyes got a lot worse, and then kind of found My Vision Oxfordshire, where I haven't looked back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So Dev, you've been with us for a year, so you're kind of a relatively new employee. Kind of how did you find like getting to this point? Like, what barriers did you face kind of before you got a job with us? What experience did you have with other employers in terms of their attitude and their
Yeah.
feelings?
So I can go through the sort of list. So with the retail side of it, with my eye condition, I've got tunnel vision, but what I found quite early on is how it wasn't very accessible with small little tasks that for someone that's abled and sighted, they probably find very easy. Whereas myself, it was very difficult. So for example, when we had to sign in, we had to use our fingerprints and only a certain amount of fingers, and then the sort of scanner would change color, which I couldn't see. So I did mention that to them, but they just said, "Oh, stop being silly. Like, everyone can do it. It's easy." So then instantly from that, I kind of found it difficult to speak to my management, because if they're already telling me that that's easy, it kind of made me feel a bit like, oh, well, if you're not going to help me, how am I meant to do something like this? Also, we had sort of spreadsheet sort of forms to tell us when we were working, and they were the tiniest, like font 2, like 12, but up high. And then obviously with my sort of tunnel vision, that was not the best, because I would have to stand on a chair to see when I was working, basically. Which again, I said to them, can I have a larger sort of form of this? And again, they said, no, everyone can see it, blah, blah, blah. So then that's why I kind of left that role quite quickly. So I moved into working in agriculture and on a farm, which is definitely a sort of opposite to working in retail, because you're now in the outside, and it's like nothing, not every day is the same, I guess. So I did tell my boss and my manager again that I'm visually impaired. So they did make sort of adapted the farm for me, which is quite interesting. So for example, they didn't trust me to drive the tractor, which they said they probably would have allowed me, but because obviously I disclosed that I'm visually impaired, they were like, yeah, maybe it's best not to. But they were very accommodating. Like if there was heavy machinery around, they would let me know where it was and where I should avoid for that particular task or role. Also, like for example, we had to use the teals, and they actually enlarged it for me and changed the color contrast, because for myself I can see white on black, so I see the dark contrast, and they managed to adjust that for me. So they did put some protocols in to help me with that. And then also sort of large print, which I'd never actually heard of really until kind of speaking around, and then I told my sort of employees about it, and they kind of helped me to get that sort of stuff. So that's kind of how it all started really. And then obviously then joining My Vision is kind of, I got opened up, sort of taught more sort of assistive software, which I'd never really been understood or told about. And it's kind of from there, it's been very beneficial. Realizing that sort of your site, there are other alternatives if you do lose your site, rather than just relying on your site and then that's it. You can't really do any job, I guess. I'm feeling a bit down about it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Darren. I think we'll kind of jump back to some of this stuff a bit later as well, and you know, maybe even on some of the questions at the end if we need to, and just have a bit of chat. But I wanted to bring Devil on just to give us a bit more perspective as well, just to bring it all to life really in terms of what it's like to kind of go through that process. You know, employment rates are pretty low for disabled people, and you know, quite often in the charity sector, we have a lot of charities who are there to support disabled people, particularly ourselves, but we're not employing them ourselves. So I'll just go on to our next slide. So, I'm back. That I was like, what is this? Very smooth here, what we're doing. So in terms of who we are, I just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of and then what brought us to this kind of journey, I suppose. And whilst we're doing this, I've just found the chat box, which was hiding behind another box. So there we go. So we have 11 staff, 7 of whom are visually impaired, and we actually have people with other disabilities as well within that. We have 100 volunteers, and about 35% have a visual impairment or another disability. I've put here we're 145 years old as a charity, and that kind of is a little bit irrelevant, but I bring it up because actually that's not all great history. We look at disability history, and it's sometimes quite dark and not all pleasant to kind of consider and think about. But you know, we've played our part in, you know, some ways and things we've talked about disabled people that we used to, which isn't that great. But as a charity, I believe, you know, we're here now to turn it around, to be a more open and inclusive organisation, regardless of kind of our history and where we've been and what we do. We support around 2,000 people a year across Oxfordshire, and our services include things like information and advice, counselling and befriending, and lots of different services like that. And I've put at the bottom, although it's cut off on my screen, the website and social media. So do get in touch with us and stay in touch, and see kind of what we're up to. So first thing I want to do is bring us to this quote, which I came across the other day actually, and I thought it was fantastic. So I wanted to just steal it and bring it in here. But it's a quote that says, if diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, then belonging and acceptance is being oh, hang on, mine's totally cut off on my screen here. Sorry, I'm just going to move all your lovely pictures across so I can read it. So being accepted is being able to reveal that you can't dance and still being included, which I think is really interesting. You know, I think we talk about inclusion and acceptance as actually, yeah, we've got some numbers, we've got some people, but actually, are they accepted? Are they included, regardless of what you can or can't do? You know, is this an open and safe space for people? And I really enjoyed that quote. So that's Vera Myers, who's an American activist, Verna Myers, sorry. So fantastic TED talk she's done actually, so really worth checking that out, and some great books. So yeah, really interesting. So why do we employ disabled people? Why do we bang on about it? So some of this is going to be very much relevant to our sector. Some of this might be relevant to charities that support people with disabilities, but some of this is going to be relevant across all organisations. It doesn't really matter. A big thing for us was representation and lived experience. So nothing about us without us, I've got there. So often in disability charities, it's very much been the non-disabled people dictating to disabled people how they should live their life, and how they should act, what they should do, and how we should talk about disabled people. And that's very historic. We've got lots of historic charities around, big and small, who have been doing that for a number of years. And really, we want to see that tide turn and that change. And we're slowly seeing that with more and more representation, particularly in staff and volunteers, which is so important. For us, it brings a creative workforce with different perspectives and life experiences. Again, this is across every organisation. Diversity brings you different perspectives, different backgrounds. You know, I believe like Deb's experience of having struggles with employers and having trouble finding work, getting into work, provides an outlook on life. You know, people who have disability often face many societal barriers which they've had to overcome in their own way, and they've had to work it out themselves quite often. So having that creative workforce is really powerful. For us, it's about creating opportunities. I'll put a hand up, not a hand out. You know, we're not just feeling sorry for people, we are actually providing opportunities where we want to develop people and, you know, embed people in society. And another big thing for us is only 1 in 4 blind and partially sighted people of working age are in employment. So again, this is specific to a sight loss charity like ourselves, but with such low numbers, so only 25% of the people we work with of working age are actually in employment of some kind. And I think there's an even more shocking statistic where those who are born with visual impairment, about 90% will only work 1 week in their entire life. So, you know, the stats are really against us, unfortunately, in terms of actually getting into employment. And just to say on another point, which might be obvious, but actually there's obviously knock-on effects to that in terms of the ability, in terms of the way somebody lives their life, in terms of their health, mental health outcomes and their well-being outcomes, in terms of actually being able to make ends meet and being able to support yourself if you haven't got an income. It is very hard, and you know, life unfortunately will be really tough for a lot of people. So obviously it has a huge negative connotations. So this whole session is a kind of really talking through our journey about what changes we've made, what mistakes we've made, what things I think we've made which have been really good, which things have been easy to do. And again, we're looking at this from a small charity setting. We don't have an HR department, we have HR advisors, but we don't have an HR team. We are obviously a small team, and you know, I think we as a charity sector have a lot going for us in terms of being able to make simple and effective changes very quickly and very easily. And that for me is a really important thing. You know, we've done changes in our small organisation, which I know some nationals are taking months to do. And they have to have consultations and paperwork drawn up. Whereas, you know, for us, sometimes it's a case of, do you know what, we're going to do that now and we're going to try it out. And actually that's some of the things we've done and have really positive impact. So the first one is recruitment, then flexibility, development and training we're going to look at, in culture and attitude, and then adjustments. And I've put as a joke here, more than reasonable, because I'd like, if anybody knows what is reasonable for an adjustment, please put it in the comments below, because people bang on about reasonable adjustments, but nobody has a definitive answer of what is reasonable. And should we be using the word reasonable when we're actually talking about somebody's an adjustment for somebody's way of living? You know, is it to say, oh, we can't do that, that's unreasonable, so off you go, thank you very much. Okay, so recruitment, these are some of the things we've done and done very, very quickly. So first thing we've done is scrapped application forms. We go for CVs and cover letters only now, for several reasons. One, often Word document application forms can be very inaccessible. It can be very hard to use. if you use Word document application forms, how many times have you received them and they've come in the wrong format, or they've come and somebody's filled out in the wrong area and it's just not worked, and you look at it and you're really, actually sometimes for the user, the forms are really frustrating. So, you know, one way just to get over the worry of if something's inaccessible, you know, use a cover letter and a CV. That person will probably already have a CV, and you can put in your job description what you need in that covering letter and what information you desire. Next thing we've got is how much are you asking for in your applications? Are you asking for too much information from that person? What information are you asking? Is it actually relevant? And another thing we've changed in our forms is when we ask for experience, we've actually opened that up to experience from work, volunteering, or from your home life. Because actually there's so many skills we have in work, which you probably acquire from doing other things, you know, and that can really add value to a workplace. It doesn't have to have been in an official employment setting. Share as much information in the job description as possible. So FAQs, which isn't something I've actually done yet. So you know, I'm saying FAQs, but it's something I want to develop as part of our application processes for volunteers, particularly, but also for staff. But things like access to work, we include. So we include information about what is access to work and a link to access to work within our job descriptions. We do include some of the information about where the employment might be held, what exactly the person will be doing. What we're trying to avoid, and the reason why we do is that there's no surprises at the end. So once you've got to the stage of interview and then hopefully employing, that actually they're aware of everything that's going on and it's not a sudden shock on the day. And this leads us to the next question, which is share the interview questions beforehand and as much information as possible. So sometimes a bit of debate around sharing interview questions. We've been doing it for about a year and a half now, about 18 months. You know, a couple of times it's, you know, you've had maybe not the most, I guess as people have read off notes and things, you do get that, but actually is that then better for them? And I think that's the questions I would ask, is that then made them feel more comfortable? Because an interview process isn't about catching people out, it's about getting to know the right person for the job, and getting to know that person and who they are. It's not about having a perfect, you know, person who interviews, and it often can cut out some of those nerves. And that's why as well, sharing as much information as possible before is really important. You know, where's the interview? Who's going to be at the interview? What's the transport arrangements? Where's the best place to get there? Because, you know, interviews are so stressful anyway. Why make it even more stressful by not giving that information, which you will have to hand yourselves? Provides genuine feedback to disabled people. So this might be a little bit more specific to us, as we obviously have a duty of care for our clients and people we work with. We obviously have a drive to ensure more disabled people are in employment. So we're providing sort of a roadmap to success. We might be linking with other employment services and getting people connected, support after employment. And just to say, we, you know, plenty of disabled people have applied for jobs with us. Sometimes we don't interview them, sometimes they don't get the job. I think, you know, we're not just employing people for the sake of it. And that's why actually at the end, we want to give feedback so they can get the right job next time with somebody else or with us. So Dev actually wasn't, he applied for 2 jobs for us and didn't get the first one, did you, Dev? So we ended second time round.
Yeah.
And I think we stay in touch after your first one, and we certainly
Yes, yeah. I've just from what you said there, like it was very unique, the sending the interview questions before, which was good because it kind of got rid of that anxiety of what are they going to ask me, I found. But as well as that, kind of when you told me the reason I didn't get the first job, it was kind of quite beneficial for me, of like I understood where you were coming from, perspective, like the perspective of that, which I found more reassuring, rather than sometimes the employer will not give you any reason for why you didn't get the job. It's usually just a text or an email just saying, sorry, you've been unsuccessful for this role. and you
Yeah.
kind of leave with questions thinking, what did I say wrong or why? But you kind of answered all those when you gave me it was more personable as well with the sort of phone call.
Yeah.
Which
So
I
we
found
always try to call people up afterwards. The best process for them to give them a phone call, have a chat through the interview. And I know this takes time, and this is something which I know can be slightly frustrating for some people, but I think they've taken time to come to you as well. And I think that's, they've taken time to research your organization. I can give 5 minutes of my time to give them feedback. And actually, often we get really uncomfortable about saying no to somebody, but actually, if you give them feedback and the genuine reasons, it really helps break that ice. And I'm really pleased Dev stayed in touch, because he's now in what is a really good job for himself and for the organization. No unnecessary qualifications or requirements. Does the job really need a driving license? So many jobs I've seen do not need a driving license to do the job. I think really have a think about that. Does the job need a degree? People with disabilities are less likely to have a degree, statistically, unfortunately. Very different issue, but that's the reality. So adding in that degree, is that necessary? What is the degree actually going to add value to the job, which you couldn't get from other experience? And do not use the excuse "or relevant experience." I think, again, that's like reasonable adjustments. We have no idea how to benchmark that on what you mean. And actually, also, often people will not apply based on these unnecessary requirements. They'll just won't apply because they'll firstly think it's not for them, and secondly, they'll think they're not welcome as well, which is, the thing which I would not want to put, to the name of the organisation. Scrap jargon and explain acronyms. I bet we've got hundreds of acronyms we all know in the small charity sector. What are your KPIs? So what is EDI? What is GDPR? Let's make sure we explain them or link to them. Some you might not know. Again, this is not necessarily disability specific, but jargon and acronyms can be confusing for some people with certain disabilities. Make it simple. Explain what you are on about. Sometimes we receive covering letters full of acronyms, and I'm having to Google what they are because I have no idea. So advertise amongst disabled people as well. Again, this might be more specific to us, but there are certain places you can advertise. A company called Even Break, they're a social enterprise, and it's a job board specifically for disabled people. And huge, loads of companies use that. So really recommended to get in touch with them. They're called Even Break. And we've done, so again, might be more specific to us. So we've added in more entry-level roles. So we've done an internship recently with somebody who's visually impaired in a fundraising role. And that's been really good sort of learning for us and for them, but a great way to have people in. And we'll be looking at an apprenticeship either later in the year or next year. And that will be specific for somebody who has a disability. So, those are things you can do, and they can bring in really good talent and not necessarily at a huge cost to yourself. Again, cost will always be on people's minds, but things like apprenticeships, internships, you can do them in cost-effective ways. Apprenticeship levy is one thing, particularly for small charities, should really get into. Big employers can give money towards that, and there's also government incentives as well. Again, if you haven't got the infrastructure, it might not be the right thing for you, but well worth it if it's something you want to explore. Okay, so we're going to move on now to flexibility. So some of this stuff might be really obvious, that sometimes we just forget, or sometimes we think, oh, I don't know if I do that, it's not that big a deal, but actually it can be for some people. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to admit something. Also, if you are just joining as well, or you have joined partway through, the recording will be available next week on the site. Flexibility, flexible hours and working patterns, kind of an obvious one, but one thing again, being open to that, making sure it's obvious in a job description if you're open to that. And again, making sure it fits for you as an organisation. Is it the right thing? What hours would work? We have one person on our team who works term time only, and that works really well for her, works really well for us, and it's a really win-win situation. So, you know, we have people that work part-time, we have people who have kind of, you know, a bit more flexible hours and where they're working from. So again, I'm putting here working from office, home, other location. Devante's in Starbucks at the moment, although I don't think that has anything to do with your disability, does it, Dev? But just
Good drinks, good drinks.
just, you know, drinks and practicalities. But being open to where people work, and I've put office because actually sometimes office is the preferred location. So it's not always working from home. I know we've gone to that other end of the spectrum now, where, you know, obviously working from home is a kind of big deal. But actually, for some people, working from the office is going to be the better scenario. So being open to talk to people, supporting them, and being open to share that you've got flexibility. Time off for medical appointments, again, something we do. If people need time off, very flexible on that. Again, you're more likely to have medical appointments if you have a disability, so ensuring that that's obvious, and that we do talk about it as well. I've put here avoid early morning meetings. That's not disability specific, but, you know, is that 7 a.m. breakfast meeting really appropriate? You're gonna exclude plenty of people from that. You know, lots of people with disabilities will not be driving to locations, may have to use public transport. Parents like myself, who I have a 2-year-old at home, so I might actually need to drop my child off at childcare, and so my other parents in the organisation. And disabled people have children too, by the way. I'm just going to add that in. Less meetings, more action. This is something, you know, not everybody is akin to a meeting environment. Sometimes meetings can actually be quite stressful for somebody with a particular disability. So do you need that meeting? Question, is it really appropriate to have a meeting? Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I don't want to overrun too much. Development and training. So meaningful career paths. We don't treat our employees who have a disability with, well, this is your lot, well done, you've made it onto the job ladder, you should be grateful. You know, everybody gets a chance at a career development, career path, and going their careers. And again, the sort of passion I have on this is ensuring that people actually are conditions who have disabilities as well. Particularly in what for me is particularly in the sight loss sector, but particularly in the charity sector, we need more disability representation at senior level. Yeah, things like courses, workshops, webinars. I think, you know, this should be stuff we're doing for all of our staff, but there's so much available. The fact that you're on this webinar, I think, is really important. But again, opening that up to all your colleagues, you know, do all your colleagues get the you know, access to the information about Small Charities Week and other webinars and workshops that are available. There's so much out there, just making sure everybody's aware of them. Mentoring programs can be really useful for some people. So knowledge sharing, individual personal experiences is really important. So having that space to share if appropriate. Team learning is something we've recently started working on, kind of team learning environments, learning together, problem solving together. Really interesting how much that actually builds your team and builds the knowledge of the team as well. And a flexible approach to learning. We don't all learn in the same way. Do your team really want to sit down and watch a 10-minute training video about something? Actually, is there a different way we all learn? And I think we've probably all done these tests before where we're all learning different ways. Again, somebody with disabilities will probably learn differently from how you do. So think about that. You know, what is, you know, do you have just one package of training modules and that's the only way you can learn about GDPR? You know, make sure you're open and people are available to learn in different ways. So I'm rattling through here because I don't want to take up too much time. This one is probably one of the biggest, culture and attitude. So this is something weirdly we've worked on. And again, we assume that being a sight loss charity, we would be the best at doing this, and our history would be so glamorous. It's not. We've had to kind of turn the ship ourselves. We've had to think about our own attitudes towards employing disabled people, and as a team, as an organisation, we've had to really work on this. So developing a culture of support. This is a really important one. Dev, do you want to say anything here? Because you're kind of, a year into the organisation. I feel like me talking about it, it might be better from you.
Sorry, could you just repeat that last bit?
The culture of support. So in terms of the support of the team, do you find that is actually helped you in your journey and when you joined?
100%. So for example, stepping into the charity, and it's a role I've never done before, kind of having the staff around that kind of gave me their tips and what advice was really beneficial for me to kind of develop as a person. I was quite nervous when I first started, and just having someone else that's visually impaired kind of helped me to break down that barriers. Looking at that particular colleague, I was like, if he can do it, so can I. So it's kind of that relatable sort of process, I guess. But then the culture, I feel like with everyone at the charity, it's always an open door, so you can speak to everyone and they're quite happy to, as you say, give sort of advice and problem solving. Like no one, you wouldn't know in the roles either, like who's who, like who's your manager to who's like a support worker or anything, because everyone's so open-minded and quite sort of kind and given, I guess.
Yeah. So I Dev summed up my leadership style of telling people if Mark can do it, then anybody can, I think, is the attitude. Which if I can do it, then I think anybody can pretty much do this, because I a very uneducated individual who makes it up as he goes along, I think. Is that right, Dev?
100%.
So accepting and celebrating differences, really powerful. This one, zero tolerance to bullying. So it's guaranteed that your disabled employee has probably been bullied at some point in their life. Unfortunately, it's just reality. So making sure that you have a zero, I mean, you should anyway, but it's about the disabled person on TV or your what's the chat about how comfortable and uncomfortable people feeling for the way we're talking about people. So yeah, again, it goes into creating a safe space to work. So important, so obvious, but so important. How we talk about disability. So for us, there's no place for sympathy. We don't start going there to our volunteers and staff when they come with their disability. We live as examples. We make sure we get the support, but we're not here to feel sorry for people. And I often say to some of our colleagues who also have a visual impairment, I often say actually it's often harder working for a visual impairment charity when you've got a visual impairment, because your life is in a fishbowl. You're constantly being reflected on your disability, how you live your disability, and you're constantly compared and looked to as a model, and looked to as a kind of person with experience. So it's actually often harder. So yeah, not seeing our disabled colleagues as the expert on all things disability. So this is a really common one, and we get stuck into this rut. But actually making sure we're not just consulting our own colleagues all the time. Actually let them get on with their jobs. And particularly, the token disabled person is not necessarily going to be your accessible expert in the organisation. And sometimes we can get into that rut as small charities because of the small budgets, but be sensitive to that, and you will get to know your team. I think that's the most important thing. And this is what I'm going to really totally put our hands up to this. Your disabled colleagues are not your next fundraising champion, and I'm talking about inspiration porn here, as we call it. They're not. We see it around the Paralympics. We're not all superheroes, and we're not all here to do great videos where we're used as bait. Actually, this is something we've done. Unfortunately, it's something we've used staff, and we do sometimes do it without kind of thinking about it and about really, because there's been times when people have felt probably a bit more, use the word forced, but kind of feel like there had to be that kind of video, do that video, had to do that interview, but actually that's not necessarily the right thing, and people should be pushed into. So making sure you're aware of that as you employ disabled staff, particularly when you're involved with fundraising. Okay, adjustments, what is reasonable, workplace assessments, getting to know access to work. This is really important. Get to know it before you need it, or before somebody in your team needs it. Understand the system, just read up about it. So access to work is a DWP system funding for getting to work, traveling around in work, and for equipment, and for support workers. Really good resource, has many flaws, but worth getting to know the system, what you're entitled to and what your colleagues will be entitled to. And actually, if you've got a team, share it around, because there may be people in your team with hidden or invisible disabilities who could actually have some support from access to work. So don't just think it's for the visible disabilities. Things like work environments, really important to look at. Is the accessible toilet a storage cupboard? Quite often the case it is. So being aware of those things. Is your attitude the biggest barrier? I'm just putting that as a question mark. Self-check, sometimes can be. Sometimes our own attitudes are the ones that stop us seeing and employing somebody with a disability. And don't tiptoe around the issue. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Assumptions. Hey, what are the challenges we faced? So I'm getting close to the end now, don't worry. So some of the challenges we faced, opening up our applications a bit more. We've had a lot more inappropriate applications, ones which people that aren't ready for work, people that just aren't in that space, but they've applied anyway. And that's something actually, we take ownership of that, and we deal with it, and we give those people support in whatever way we can. Can't always do it, but again, you will have more applications which just aren't right for your job, for your environment. Occasionally we have lack of workplace skills. Quite often somebody with a disability might not have had a job before. This might be their first job, particularly when you start with entry-level roles. Actually, that can be a real challenge. They don't necessarily understand some of the basic things which we all take for granted about workplace etiquette. And just coming alongside people, giving them support, not patronizing, not judging them because of it. Many disabled people don't have those, what you might call early jobs in life, where you might have had a job in a cafe or a restaurant or a shop. You might not have had that opportunity. So being aware of that is just going to help you a long way. But access to work, massive challenge because of waiting lists, and the system does have its flaws, but it is still very useful. Plenty of societal barriers for disabled people in your work, remembering that actually, once they've got to work, they may have faced all sorts of prejudice and discrimination on that journey. They may face it within your own work, from like trying to apply for something within the organisation. We've got a fundraiser who's visually impaired, and she's had to apply for funding where the application form times out, things like that they have to face, and we've got to provide the support, and that's a real frustration. Internal ableism, again, keeping yourself in check. Is it you and the organisation attitude that could be the problem? Lastly on here, don't wait for perfection. I've stolen a phrase here, but culture eats policy for breakfast. This is stolen from culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is I think Peter Drucker, the management leadership specialist. But you will not tie up all your policies. So many people come to me and they want to find out what our biggest policy on employing disabled people, and reams of documents and risk assessments. of employing somebody with a disability and all this stuff, and actually, you know, they've got the wrong side of it. They're working on the wrong side of the problem. You know, we want to work on the culture side and the people side and make sure we've got our culture in check. And the policies, yes, we will write them, and yes, we will have them, but actually we will write them together as a team. We won't write a policy to say how we should be employing our disabled staff. We work on the employment and the culture and the team before we do any of that. Positives, just breaking down barriers, massive one. Creative thinking, I came up with that earlier. Reflecting society, so 21% of working age people are disabled. So think about your staff. Is 21% of your staff set up and volunteer set up? Do they have a disability? For us, this is a personal one for us. Lived experience is really important. Absolutely massive game changer for how our clients interact with us, for how our service users come in. Often we are the first people they meet after a diagnosis of visual impairment. So I'm really pleased that they can come in and they know that they're talking to people that just get it and just have that empathy and that understanding to some degree. So that's really powerful for us. Stronger team, definitely, I think huge benefit for us. And I think increased applications and interest from disabled people, but also other diverse communities. So, you know, I would say we've seen an increase in diverse applications because actually there's obviously an understanding which we really value lived experience, we value disability, and we value the perspective that somebody from a marginalised community will have. So that has really opened up doors for us. Final thoughts, so I'm just going to end on these. All your employees are unique anyway, so treat them as humans, not as conditions. You know, they're all people. We are all people. What experience we have doesn't matter. You can get bad disabled employees and volunteers. You know, 21% of the working population, we're not all really nice people. I know me and Dev are, but you know, there are some of us which aren't. So, you know, bear that in mind. You know, you might have had a really bad experience. And I've heard people say, oh, we've employed somebody with X, Y, Z, and they just didn't get on, they weren't very good. Well, is that to do with their disability, or is it just because they're just not a nice person, or they've got issues elsewhere? Don't lump it into the fact that they are disabled. It's better to do it wrong than not to do it at all. And this has become almost a bit of a motto for us in terms of inclusivity. Actually, we should be trying rather than waiting to try, and that is, you know, some things we often see. Well, we're not there yet. Actually, let's just start doing it, and we will then listen and learn and change. You know, it's, as they say, it's easier to turn a moving ship than a still one. I think that's the phrase. So do it and change how you do it within that, and get to know the support that's available to you and your organization before you need. And the last thing I'm going to say is don't be arrogant, listen, learn, and own your mistakes. You know, we've made mistakes as an organization. We will continue to make mistakes as an organization, but I think having that culture of learning is really, really important for us. Thinking about, you know, how we adapt that and then change that, you know, and being totally honest about it. You know, it's not all rosy. It's been, you know, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we have difficult conversations, as we would with lots of employees, but own that. And, you know, I think, you know, pride can often come in the way from taking those risks. So yeah, I'm sorry that was quite quick at the end, because I realized the time and realized where we were. I'm coming from the perspective of this is what we've done and this is our experience. I'm really interested to know other people's experience of how they've adapted. We've still got loads to learn and we've still got loads to do. And you know, that's the most important thing, is we're not, you know, I don't think we ever will reach a perfection stage. So, you know, this is just some simple things which we've done. So thank you for kind of listening. I think if you've got any questions, this is probably the time to ask, I would imagine. I don't know where we are for time, so.
I was just going to say, first of all, Mark, like, thank you so much. That was really human, really honest. I don't know about you, but it seemed really practical in terms of things that can be used, which is great. We have kind of run over, so we won't be able to go through all the questions that are in the chat, but Mark's given an open invitation for you to get in contact. So if there are things that you want to talk about, you can. But I just wanted to pick one question out, if that's all right, and that was from Rohan quite earlier on, and you partly answered it, but it's more a sort of call to arms or a call to action, really. And like, what would the one thing that you would say, Mark, that we could all do collectively to help boost employment rates for disabled people? What can we all go away and do now to kind of start on that road?
Yeah, it's, you know, there's plenty of practical things you could do, but the one thing, and I think Dev probably will agree, the barriers we face generally comes down to attitude. So, you know, checking your attitude and just getting to know other disabled people. And I can guarantee we all have misconceptions when you meet people in the street of what they can or can't do. You know, you might see a wheelchair user, you will make probably a misconception about what they can or can't do. And I think, you know, keeping our attitudes in check and being open, I think that's probably the main thing. You know, all the other things come from that. So having the attitude to listen and learn will, other things will come from that. But attitude is probably one of the biggest barriers we face. So yeah, and that sounds like a hard thing to say. And I've got loads of attitude things I need to check. You know, we don't want to start on that, but you know, in terms of sorts of things, we need to make sure we're open though.